Keluarga Malaysia, good afternoon. You're watching Updates at Noon with me, Renee Fong. And for our headlines today, future generation should continue to preserve unity, racial and cultural diversity. Russian rocket strike kills at least 22 on Ukraine's Independence Day. The Merdeka Quartet, comprising 4 cabinet ministers representing the various races of Malaysia, wants the next generation to continue to preserve unity, racial and cultural diversity for peace and the country's well-being. Communications and Multimedia Minister Tan Sri Anwar Musa said the multiracial bond that forms the basis of the nation's formation must be passed down and emulated by the younger generation. Tan Sri Anwar, who is main organising committee chairman for the 2022 National Day and Malaysia Day HKHM celebrations, said Malaysia was formed through a multiracial society that came together to fight for independence. He said the concept of unity is important for Malaysia. Even the theme of the National Day this year is Malaysian families strong together. Tan Sri Anwar Musa noted that the Prime Minister chose togetherness as the philosophy of managing the country.
Semuanya atas dasar kepelbagaian, atas dasar kebersamaan yang melibatkan partisipasi daripada pelbagai kaum. Jadi kalau dilihat daripada mana kita datang dan ke mana kita nak pergi sebagai sebuah negara, landasannya adalah landasan perpaduan yang dituntut oleh agama sendiri.
Meanwhile, Transport Minister Datuk Seri Dr. Wee Ka Siong said Malaysia achieved independence because there was an understanding between the various races, adding that the younger generation should appreciate this important part of history. He also said that the country's greatest success is that everyone can unite in diversity, and diversity is a national treasure. The minister added that national unity began with a spirit of tolerance, respect and appreciation of other people's cultures by the previous generations. Human Resources Minister Datuk Sri M. Saravanan meanwhile said the unity that bonded Malaysian society had always been the country's strength when faced with economic slowdown, health crisis and political issues, adding that through all this, the country was able to rise and overcome the problem of unemployment. He said during the Movement Control Order, MCO, the unemployment rate was 5.3% and in 12 months it dropped to 4.3%. He noted that the country is now trying to achieve an unemployment rate of 3.5%. Datuk Sri Saravanan added that in planning various programs for the people, the government always ensures that all levels of society from various backgrounds are assisted and that no one was left behind. Another Merdeka Quartet member, Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs Minister Datuk Sri Alexander Nantalinggi, talked about the spirit of unity enjoyed by Sarawak's various ethnicities. He said Sarawak does not look at racial differences as a problem, as people of different faith assisted one another, such as in churches, surau and temples, because differences are celebrated as an asset. On another note, Tan Sri Anwar said the country's film industry has great potential and efforts to boost. It should be done through collaborations between local players and more experienced international players. He said the move would help to speed up the process to bring the country's film industry to the global stage. Elaborating further, the minister said all relevant parties should accept the fact and reality that the creative industry, especially the film industry, has enormous potential. According to Tan Sri Anwar, filmmakers must ensure that people from all walks of life can appreciate their storytelling to expand the market.
Kita pasaran dah tak besar, kita fragmentedkan lagi. Kita satu keluarga Malaysia, besarkan pasaran bukan hanya kepada segmen mengikut kaum, malah kita pergi rentas sempadan. supaya mendapat pasaran yang lebih besar lagi dengan cara kita membentuk kerjasama dan mengadakan skrip-skrip dan storyline yang sesuai untuk pasaran global. Saya yakin anda semua boleh melakukan itu, insya-Allah. Ya.
He said his ministry will do whatever it takes to advance the country's film industry, including making policy changes if necessary. Tan Sri Anwar added that he hoped the Ministry of Finance will have good news for the local film industry and the creative industry in Budget 2023. Health Minister Khairi Jamaluddin yesterday assured that the government will not allow recreational use of cannabis in Malaysia. Khairi is in Bangkok on a 4-day working visit to study the practices, cultivation methods, research and the use of cannabis for medical purposes in Thailand. In his Facebook post yesterday, Khairi said the ministry would draw up a robust regulatory framework and clinical practice guideline if the clinical evidence gathered shows that cannabis is safe and efficacious for medical use. However, he assured recreational use is not being considered. The post showed pictures of Khairi and Thailand's Public Health Minister Anutin Chanvirakul at one of cannabis research centres. Earlier, the Health Minister visited Siam Cannabis Land in Pattaya, where he was briefed and visited the indoor and outdoor greenhouse as well as open air site that grow different types of cannabis. On 9th June, Thailand became the first Southeast Asian country to legalize the cultivation and possession of medical cannabis. The Sultan of Perak, Sultan Nazrin Shah, yesterday received the Royal Writer Award for his book entitled Striving for Inclusive Development from Pangkor to a Modern Malaysian State. The award was presented by University Putra Malaysia UPM Pro-Chancellor Professor Emeritus Datuk Dr. Muhammad Zohadi Badai at the National Book Award organised by the National Book Development Foundation at UPM at the University in Serdang. Sultan Nazrin said his second book, published by Oxford University Press in 2019, contained the findings of a study on the achievement of Malaysia's progress based on a comprehensive analysis of economic and social data over a period of 150 years, starting from the Pangkor Treaty of 1874. His Highness said the research, study and analysis that took almost 20 years involved a very challenging work process to obtain data stored in various places in the form of non-uniform records, followed by the process of selecting and filtering as well coordinating and standardizing the information and data collected. Meanwhile, the Sultan of Perak said that the country's diversity from the aspects of religion, culture and language is an asset that must be harmonized through the practice of inclusiveness in order to form a strong nation that celebrates unity in diversity. His Highness added that all parties need to realize and accept the fact that Malaysia's success over the years is the result of the efforts of every citizen who are made up of various backgrounds, races, religions and cultures. Biden announces student loan relief for graduates. That and more coming up in our foreign segment. Qatar said it would invest $3 billion in Pakistan's debt-ridden economy in the latest boost by a Gulf state for the ailing South Asian nation. Pakistan has been scrambling for finance in recent months, and the International Monetary Fund is due to meet next Monday to discuss reviving a suspended $6 billion loan program. The United Arab Emirates this month said it would invest $1 billion in Pakistan, and according to reports, Saudi Arabia is considering extending an emergency $2 billion loan made last year. The latest boost came in talks between Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani and Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif. In an official Qatari statement, the Emir stressed the importance of the brotherly and strategic relations between the two countries and the need to bolster their economic partnership. It added that the two leaders also discussed cooperation in defense and sports, assistance from Gulf nations, and a $2.5 billion loan from China has helped Pakistan stave off the West of an economic crisis that has seen annual inflation rise above 20%. A $6 billion IMF bailout package signed by former Prime Minister Imran Khan in 2019 has never been fully implemented because the government failed to carry out promised cuts to subsidies and to improve revenue collection. Pakistan's economy, however, has shown recent signs of life as the rupee has strengthened and the stock market has made gains in the past 2 weeks. Record monsoon rains, meanwhile, were causing a catastrophe of epic scale in Pakistan as more than 800 deaths were recorded since June. Heavy rain continued to pound much of Pakistan, with authorities reporting more than a dozen deaths, including 9 children, in the last 24 hours. The country's climate change minister Sherry Rahman said authorities would launch an appeal for international help once an assessment was complete. According to the Global Climate Risk Index, Pakistan is 8th on a list of countries deemed most vulnerable to extreme weather caused by climate change. Zahir Ahmad Babar, a senior meteorological office official, said that this year's rains were the heaviest since 2010, when over 2,000 people died and more than 2 million were displaced by monsoon floods that covered nearly a fifth of the country. The annual monsoon is essential for irrigating crops and replenishing lakes and dams across the Indian subcontinent, but each year it also brings a wave of destruction. The National Disaster Management Authority said in a statement that nearly 125,000 homes had been destroyed and 288,000 more were damaged by the floods. Some 700,000 livestock in Sindh and Balochistan had been killed and nearly 2 million acres of farmland destroyed. Nearly 3,000 kilometers of roads had also been damaged. At least 22 people were killed and dozens wounded in a Russian rocket strike on a Ukrainian train station on Wednesday, as Ukraine marked the anniversary of its independence from the Moscow-dominated Soviet rule. Its president, Volodymyr Zelensky, had warned the risk of repugnant Russian provocations on Independence Day, which by chance was also 6 months since Russian forces invaded Ukraine, touching off Europe's most devastating conflict since World War II. In a video addressed to the United Nations Security Council, Zelensky said the rockets hit a train in the small town of Chapelin, some 145 kilometers west of the Russian-occupied Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, in which 4 carriages were caught on fire. Zelensky then pledged that Ukraine would fight until the end. The Russian missile strike on Chaplino station in central Dnipropetrovsk region had killed 22 people and wounded 50 others. In Washington, a senior official warned that Russia could begin announcing referendums designed to formalize its control of occupied areas as soon as this week. Russia has repeatedly denied its forces are aiming at civilian targets. The country's defense minister Sergei Shoigu said Moscow had deliberately slowed down what it refers to as its special military operations in Ukraine to avoid civilian casualties. Hundreds of passengers were evacuated from a Eurotunnel train under the channel between Britain and France after a technical problem occurred. GetLink, which runs the rail link between Coquelles in northern France and Folkestone in southeast England, said some 400 people had to abandon their vehicles on Tuesday. Everyone who was caught up in the incident had been carried across, diversions removed, and the GetLink services had returned to normal. U.S. President Joe Biden on Wednesday announced that most U.S. university graduates still trying to pay off student loans will each get $10,000 in relief. The proposed debt relief falls far short of some Democrats' goal of securing complete forgiveness ahead of the midterm congressional elections. The bill, however, was opposed by Republicans who argued that shaving any amount from graduates' loans is unfair to those who have spent years saving to pay off their own debts. U.S. colleges can often cost anywhere between $10,000 and $70,000 a year, leaving graduates with crushing debt as they enter the workforce. According to government estimates, the average debt for U.S. college students when they graduate is $25,000, a sum many spend years or even decades to pay back. In total, some 45 million borrowers nationwide owe a collective $1.6 trillion. Under the relief plan, $10,000 will be cut from all loans owed by people earning a salary of less than $125,000. For former students who went to university with need-based government assistance known as Pell Grants, the relief will be $20,000. Republican National Committee Chair Drona McDaniel called the plan a bailout for the wealthy, adding that as hard-working Americans struggle with soaring costs and a recession, Biden decided to give a handout to the rich. The government of Chilean President Gabriel Boric said that it has revived efforts to pass a bill that would reduce working hours in the country and fulfill a campaign promise. The bill, which aims to reduce the working week from 45 to 40 hours within 5 years, has stalled in Congress since it was introduced in 2017 by then lawmaker and current government spokesperson Camila Vallejo. Boric has given urgency to the bill, a provision in Chile's constitution that forces lawmakers to consider a bill when mandated by the president. Lawmakers will debate a series of changes to the bill made by Boric's government, including a revision extending the reduction in working hours to workers in special categories, such as public transport drivers and domestic workers. Boric said the improvements are much needed to bringing the country closer to a new Chile. The centre-left government has promoted dialogue with unions and worker federations along with representatives from small, medium and large companies at a time when the economy of the world's largest copper producer is slowing down and faces strong inflationary pressures after a rapid post-pandemic recovery. Boric said his government expected the bill to be voted on and approved as soon as possible by both legislative houses. Fighting erupted between government forces and Tigrayan rebels in northern Ethiopia, shattering a 5-month truce and dealing a blow to peace efforts. Reports of fresh offensives were followed by Ethiopia's Air Force announcing it had downed a plane carrying weapons for the Tigray People's Liberation Front (TPLF). The government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the rebels have accused each other of undermining efforts to peacefully resolve the brutal 21-month war in Africa's second most populous nation and traded blame over who was responsible for returning to combat. UN Chief Antonio Guterres said he was deeply shocked by the renewed fighting and appealed for an immediate cessation of hostilities and for the resumption of peace talks. The head of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, called for a de-escalation and the resumption of talks to seek a peaceful solution. The TPLF said government forces and their allies had launched a large-scale offensive towards southern Tigray early Wednesday after a month-long lull in the fighting. But the government accused the TPLF of striking first and violating the ceasefire. The rival claims could not be independently verified as access to northern Ethiopia is restricted. But there were reports of fighting around southern Tigray in areas bordering the Amhara and Afar regions. Colombian drug traffickers facing charges in the United States will avoid extradition if they turn themselves in. New leftist Colombian President Gustavo Petro said members of the powerful and heavily armed Gulf drug cartel will enjoy legal benefits if they quit the narcotics trade and surrender. But he did not specify if this meant not having to serve prison time, as happened with leftist guerrillas under a 2016 peace accord. Elaborating on the matter, Petro said he would negotiate with the United States on how to implement the non-extradition offer. After 4 decades of international efforts to fight the drug trade, Colombia is still the world's largest cocaine producer, and the United States is the biggest consumer of the drug. Petro said the drug war has failed and he wants to focus instead of reducing demand for cocaine in developed countries. Petro says he will also resume negotiations with Colombia's last active guerrilla group, the National Liberation Army, ELN. Most of the main guerrilla army, the FARC, laid down their arms under the 2016 peace accord, but some renegade members are still fighting the government. These fighters and the ELN use revenue from drug trafficking to remain active, adding that he has received letters from the Gulf cartel seeking peace and a different way out of the drug war. Mark Rutherford, a British-Belgian 17-year-old, landed in Bulgaria on Wednesday to become the youngest person to fly solo around the world. 5 months and a day after taking off from Bulgaria in March, Rutherford returned to the small airport near the town of Radomir, an hour from the capital Sofia, to claim his record. Dressed in an airman suit with his dark curly hair tamed by a blue cap, the slight teenager voiced a regret that the adventure was over, describing a definite sense of freedom when you are flying. Rutherford comes from a line of pilots, as his family boasts 4 generations of flyers, and Mac got his first taste of being at the controls when he was just 7. His record-breaking flight covered 54,000 kilometers in 221 hours of flying time across 30 countries. He also had to face temperatures of up to 48 degrees, not least during the many hours spent waiting for overflight authorizations. His solo ordeal also included a forced landing on the uninhabited island of Attu, west of Alaska, due to strong winds. Mac Rutherford's feat was recognized by the Guinness World Records Group with a certificate confirming that he had beaten the record set last year by 18-year-old Travis Ludlow of Britain. He also achieved the feat in an ultralight aircraft, taking the record from his sister Zara as the youngest pilot to do so. She, however, remains the youngest woman to complete a solo round-the-world flight, which she did at the start of the year at the age of 19. In sports, KL City gunned down PSM Makassar to become ASEAN Zone champs. Stay tuned. Kuala Lumpur City made history in the Asia Football Confederation or AFC Cup football competition after thrashing Indonesia's PSM Makassar 5-2 in the ASEAN Zone final at the KLFA Stadium last night. The City boys will next play against India's ATK Mohun Bagan in the Asian Interzone Playoff semi-finals in India on 9th September. In an evenly matched first half, KL City opened the score sheet through Romel Morales on the 33rd minute. KL then doubled their lead in first half, added time through Ghanaian import Jordan Minta, who slammed home a cross from Romel. Things then went from bad to worse for PSM Makassar in the second half after their defender fouled KL midfielder Jafri Yahya in the box, awarding a penalty kick for the City boys. Paulo Josu stepped up to coolly slot home the penalty to make it 3-0 for KL. However, PSM Makassar was still determined to close the gap, and it paid off when Yakub Sayuri pulled one back for them in the 57th minute. Boosted, PSM Makassar went on the offensive mode and narrowed the deficit in the 62nd minute through Akbar Tanjung. Makassar's resurgence woke KL out of their slumber, and Josu added his second goal of the night from close range before Hadin Azman slotted in a late spot kick after Minta was fouled inside the box in the dying minutes. The Kuala Lumpur Sports Industry Expo EISKL 2022 on 6th to 9th October will be a platform to highlight the potential and contribution of the sports industry to the country's economic development. This expo will gather the sports industry players and promotes from various segments such as retail, facility management, sports equipment and product manufacturers, event consultants and sports technology, medicine and tourism. The Youth and Sports Ministry KBS in a statement said that EISKL 2022 would be held at the car parking lots A and B of the National Sports Complex in Bukit Jalil. The statement added that the expo will feature an array of interesting events such as display and sales of sports equipment, products and services, sports industry conference, mass sports and a food truck carnival. Youth and Sports Minister Datuk Sri Ahmad Faizal Azumu is scheduled to officially open the expo-themed sports industry catalyst for national economy, organised by KBS through the Sports Industry Secretariat. Marc Soler entered Spain's 2-year wait for a stage winner at the Grand Tour as a late solo attack earned him victory on stage 5 of the Vuelta a España. Meanwhile, Frenchman Rudy Mollard seized the leader's red jersey after a hilly 187.2 kilometres ride from Iran to Bilbao. Spaniard Soler of UAE Team Emirates attacked from a chasing group to catch and pass Britain's Jake Stewart from Groupama FDJ on the final climb and stayed away to cross the line 4 seconds ahead of the chasers, including Frenchman Mollard, the 28-year-old who also won a Vuelta stage in 2020. Defending champion Primož Roglič of Jumbo-Visma had taken the red jersey on stage 4 but finished back in the peloton and is now 5th, 4 minutes and 9 seconds back. It was no surprise, however, that Roglic's team relinquished the jersey as they will bide their time and the Slovenian will still be favoured to claim overall victory. Mollard, thanks to 3 bonus points he claimed on the final climb of Alto del Vivero, will take a slender 2-second lead over Britain's Fred Wright into stage 6. Soler appears to have been in trouble on the day's final climb, having bridged across to the breakaway group, but he bussed to the front with 2.5 kilometres of the ascent left. It is looked as though he would be caught on the descent into Bilbao, but he maintained a 10-second lead and the chasers left it too late to reel him in. And that wraps up today's updates at noon. Recap of our headline today. Future generation should continue to preserve unity, racial and cultural diversity. Don't forget to join us again on News at 10, coming up at 10 p.m. on Saluran Berita RTM. I'm Renee Fong. Goodbye for now.